Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Liz Scully. She's a podcaster and she does some other things, and we're going to talk about something we both absolutely love. So, welcome, Liz. Thank you for coming, and tell us a little bit about who you are, and particularly the thing that you just shared with me that you love.
Well, let's start with the most obvious thing about me. I sound English. I'm Irish, but I have an English accent.
Oh,
That is endlessly confusing I travel a lot. I certainly used to be completely nomadic for a long time. And wherever I went, people were like, "You're English." No, I'm Irish. So I am Irish, heavily disguised as English because I didn't grow up in Ireland. Simple as that. I am a business strategist. I work with people that have service businesses, so coaches and copywriters and designers, and I help them grow their business whilst not burning out. That's the key, so that people can be happy and help people and still have a bit of energy at the end of the day. And the reason I'm so obsessed by not burning out is that for 20 years, I worked in post-production in the film industry doing big Hollywood films. So I was surrounded by people doing beautiful work that was gradually destroying them from the amount of hours that they worked. So I know I've burnt out. My clients are all either they have burnt out or they're recovering from burnt out. I see it everywhere. We all work so hard. And if I can help people in any way have the joy back in their business and achieve more and not work stupid hours, well, my life will be great.
I think that's fantastic. And I've interviewed a lot of people, but I think you're the first one who's actually, maybe the second one who has actually said that they're working to help people not burn out, to avoid that sort of thing. And so, what does it feel like to be in a state of being burned out in your work?
It's horrendous. I used to work for DreamWorks in India, and I can remember like just sprinting to the finish for the end of a show. It might have been Madagascar 3, Madagascar 4. I can't remember. It was a big film. You push really hard. We call it crunch time. And when that was over, I can remember sitting in my house and I had time off and I wanted to go on vacation. I knew where I wanted to go and I was too tired to go on holiday.
Mm-hmm.
I sat there in my living room, sort of staring into space, thinking, I know what I want to do. I have no motivation or energy to do it. I know I will feel better if I do this. And I sat there, I was pretty much dribbling. And I'm like, yeah, this is not good.
I had an experience, this is probably 20 years ago, of working up to the moment that the family left to go on vacation. And, I had these deadlines to meet. And we were going to drive, we're going to drive across country. We're going to drive from North Carolina to Wyoming. And I forget what time of day. We left at probably midday, but I had been working through the night and then got in the car. My wife was driving the car and I was in the passenger seat. And about an hour into the trip, I said, pull over. And she pulled over and I got out and I went over and threw up in the grass next to the highway. And I felt great after that. But I had this raging headache going on. It was, I had a migraine and I was, and my kids watched all this and they have challenged me ever since about my work habits.
Yes. And I really believe I was certainly a workaholic. And I don't think like any of those aholic problems, it never goes away. You're simply not doing it right now. It could creep back. And I can feel that because it feels that adrenaline rush of work, and achieving stuff and putting out fires and doing things. It feels amazing. You get home at the end of the day and you've done so much. You have been a linchpin. And it's not healthy. You like occasionally, sure, but all the time. And it took me a long time to learn that being tired was a normal sign. It's a good sign. When I woke up having done 7, 8 days in a row, 18 hours in a row, when I woke up in the morning and I wasn't tired and I was straight into work, That's not good. That's not normal. That's adrenaline. So it took me years to get over the film industry, that feeling of, okay, I'm tired because I worked hard yesterday. That's a great feeling. It doesn't sound like it'd be a great feeling, but it's the right feeling.
Oh, I totally understand that. And, it requires us to make changes, and it requires us to enter into a transitional stage. And I did this back in the mid teens, 2000 teens. And I was starting over. I picked up and I moved to Wyoming. And, a lot of things had ended, and I was by myself. And I was going to write a book. And as I began to do that, I realized that my the way I approached every day was not advantageous to me writing a book. So what ended up happening was I would go to bed at 8:30 at night, and I'd wake up at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and I may work for 2 hours, go back to bed, or I'd get up at 3 o'clock and I'd be up for the rest of the day. But the quality of the work day was dependent on the quality of my sleep. So
Absolutely.
I would say that my day began when I went to bed, and the quality of that sleep then was going to determine what the next day was going to be like.
Oh, absolutely. And funnily enough, that is one of the ways I begin to help my clients move forward. Now, I would never say I'm a burnout coach. It's just, I have noticed that for a business to be successful, the owner needs to, be awake and conscious and not killing themselves. And one of the simplest ways is when I start tracking with people. So, how much sleep do you get? And are you getting more this year we worked together than last year when we worked together? And it's such a simple thing, but it makes a difference. If people are getting 3 or 4 hours sleep, and a lot of my clients come in like that, of course they're not making sensible decisions. Of course they can't possibly be happy. One of my clients that I've worked with for 4 years, I thought I knew, I understood her business. I thought I knew what was going on. Just a couple of weeks ago, happened to mention, just in passing, that every single working night, which is 6 days a week for her, she doesn't sit with the family. She has her dinner in front of her keyboard. I was like, well, occasionally. No, every night.
Oh my.
What? Not
Yeah.
good.
Yes, I understand that. I do.
Exactly. And I used to be the same. We in film they call it eating al desco instead of al fresco.
Oh, that's great. I like that. So, uh, so if you come to this, you kind of hit the wall and you realize that you're going to make a change, and nobody around you sees it yet either, and they also need to make the change. So what is it that you recommend to your folks to do?
Well, first of all, they need to make sure that their own health is solid, that they're sleeping enough, that they're dealing with that stuff. But also, most of us as entrepreneurs, we work hard because we genuinely believe that there comes a point where to make more money and to do more things, we just have to work harder. That if we just put in a few more hours, like they're maybe not in a position to hire someone else. So if they just put 2 or 3 hours extra a day in, they'll be fine. And if they just try a bit harder. So I start with really trying to pare back to just the bits that work. So in all of our businesses, we do a lot of things that don't really work. We've been doing them because, I don't know, let's think about blogging back in the day. You blog or you make videos, you make a podcast because someone told you that was what you needed to do, or you needed to be on 6 different social media sites. When we actually get under the hood of that, which bits of this are working for you? Obviously, it's your podcast. It's bringing you all of the good things. But in some businesses, I have a client who told me, again, fairly recently, that she has been blogging for years. And she's only recently realized that she hates writing. So I love doing video. I don't know why I write all the time. Yeah, well, stop it.
That, that would be liberating to her probably if she heard you say that. I mean, if
Oh, completely. And also, she can churn out video because it's very easy for her. I'm dyslexic and I enjoy writing, but it's a very slow process for me. One of my biz besties, he churns out blogs. So I make videos and he's like, how do you do so many? Like, because it's the modality that works for me. For him, it's writing and coming up with stuff. So I think there's a lot of that. Make sure you're doing the thing that is easy for you. That's the other thing as humans, we do tend to complicate stuff.
Well, you have to love what you're doing. I mean, and the love is not the love of being active or the love of being busy or the love of feeling like you're doing something important. No, it's the love of something where you feel like your best self is emerging from the process of work.
Completely. And I also think, again, particularly entrepreneurs have a habit of it only counts as work if it's very difficult.
Oh, I
Like,
love that. That is so true. Oh my.
absolutely. So the simple things, the things that you do without thinking, no, that doesn't count. No, I must force myself to write blogs, even though I hate blogs. Whereas I could do, I mean, I regularly do shoot because I have a film background. I regularly do shoots where I will knock out 30 or 40 videos, good quality videos, all of which it would take me months to write 40 blogs. Just not sensible use of my time.
But the videos is where your talent is.
But it's not just talent, it's easy for me.
Ah.
I'm in flow. Ideas push through me. It's very simple. It's really easy for me to put a shoot together. Now, I realize for most people, finding a videographer and a cameraman in a studio and putting together production management stuff, that is second nature for me.
You're raising a question for me that I've never even asked, and that is, what is it that we actually see as easy? And because you made a distinction between talent and easy there, and that's that intrigues me. I'd like to explore that a little bit more. So, what does it mean for something to be easy? Is it
So,
is it inherent in the thing itself, or is it inherent in us who are doing the easy thing?
so I think for me, that kind of ease is related to flow. There are a lot of things that we do that, like, there are people who love to cook. For them, putting together a beautiful meal is just an easy and relaxing thing. They will do it whilst 6 people sit on and they plate up beautiful food and they're chatting and everything is lovely. For them, it's easy and it's not a talent. For me, I can do all that, but I would be a little bit stressed. I would have to look at recipe books. And then there are people that, can't open a tin of soup. And for them, they would find cooking very hard. But cooking is just following a to-do list. Right? But they will understand that, but they never love it. So for me and video, I have the skills to put together a shoot, for sure. If you'd asked me to do it at 17, obviously that would be difficult. Now I know how to do that. So there's some of it, it's just, I have the skills. I know what to do. But also, I find being in front of a camera, now that I've got used to it, now I know what I look like, because that can always be a bit of a shock for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Once I know how I look when I'm speaking, it is incredibly easy. But it wasn't to begin with. For the first few years, to go from behind the camera to in front of the camera was horrific. So now I know how to put a shoot together. I can put a shoot together in a couple of hours, which I know most people don't have those skills for. And I'm very happy chatting away on a camera. And I have the skills to find editors and, all of that side of things. The technical side isn't difficult. The important bit, the bit where I talk about it being easy, is that I can flow 40 ideas clearly and coherently out of my mouth in 4 hours and make 40 blog posts, video posts.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I sat down to write it, I mean, I could do it, but it wouldn't be easy. The end result, probably a client would like it. It would be, if you were a casual reader, it would make sense, but it is effort to grind it out. So partly it's skill, but it's also, we often don't value the things that are so simple. The person who is that good at cooking, they are unlikely to have a lot of ego about the fact that they can cut a carrot really efficiently. They love it. So maybe it's a combination of really enjoying it and having the skills. And of course, when you've got the skills, you enjoy it more, have the skills. So it's kind of wrapped up together, I think.
I'm processing this, for my own awareness, and I started writing professionally in 2004. I was writing a local business leadership column for the local paper, and I started blogging in 2004. And it took about 5 or 6 years to realize that all I was doing was commenting on other people's work. I should be writing my own content, creating my own. And that's when that was about 2010. That's when it began. That has taken me to this point now, where that writing is very easy. And then in 2022, I started a Substack, and that the flow as you talk about it, it was really happened. I produced over 200,000 words in that year, and because I was in the flow and it was easy, it was rewarding. It was rewarding as well. But a few years before that, I said, well, I'm gonna figure out how to do this video thing. So I'm gonna have my computer up, and I'm gonna talk into my computer, and I'm gonna say things, and then I'm gonna post them on YouTube. Start a YouTube channel. And what I found was it would take me 40 or 50 takes in order to get a 5-minute video done. So is there a level of all of this, where what we really need to be willing to do is practice and try and learn how to make it easy, and learn how, because when it becomes easy, then we also can learn how to not be burnt out by it as well.
No, I actually genuinely believe, I absolutely take what you're saying. But when I lived in India, I had a blog when I was there. For the 3 years I lived there, 4 years I lived there. And it was an award-winning blog. It won the same awards year after year. It had lots of readers, and it was fun to do. I enjoyed it. And I got into a system that I could produce it quickly. I had an assistant that helped me. I could come up with ideas easily. I could put them together. It all worked. It became considerably less painful, quite easy to do. But when I left India and stopped writing that blog, it was delightful to stop writing it.
Uh-huh.
Whereas I genuinely believe if I had made a video, well, a vlog, as they used to call it, if I'd made that whole blog all video, I'd still be doing it.
I see. That's interesting. Wow. So you're working with a wide variety of people, it sounds like, different kinds of people, all who are in one, are they all in one form or another in a creative enterprise?
Yes, they're mostly, what I think of it as, they help people make decisions, whether it's that design, creativity, copywriting, or whether it's coaching, life changing, whatever it is, that their job is to help people make better decisions or to create a decision from indecision.
So I like to ask this question often with people, because I'm curious as what their experience was. So you've been doing this for how long?
Over 10 years.
Okay. So you were doing this, and then COVID happened, and you went through that experience with your clients, and now we're on the backside of that. So what have you seen in the way people are dealing with those kinds of transitional situations in society, where it's very challenging to them, and it may be raising the question, so what am I really supposed to be doing? What are you seeing there?
Well, for my own business, I've been on Zoom running this kind of business for a long time. And a lot of coaches are the same, right? We meet in Zoom, in video, we chat, we make hopefully life better for our clients. So what I noticed for initially for the first year of the pandemic, the big thing I noticed was not all, but the vast majority of my clients are women, which means they're in a kind of linchpin situation anyway. During the pandemic, they not only were running their own business, and a lot of them work from home. Suddenly, so was everybody else. So their home environment, that was their workspace, their office during the day, suddenly they were sharing the Wi-Fi with their partner. The kids were around. They had to educate them, all the stuff that we all had to do. But for them, there was a special feeling of, this was the part of my day that was very organized. And now there's other people here. Plus, because they are women, often they're that sandwich generation when they're looking after kids and they're looking after their parents. They're also doing all of that stuff about, making sure that the little old lady next door has got enough carrots, and that side of things. So they're already busy. They were already squashed between all of this stuff, and now suddenly their personal physical environments and the Wi-Fi, sharing the Wi-Fi, bothered them, because during the day it was their space. It's very it's sort of a tweak on what everybody had. Suddenly we all have to stay home. For them it was like, why are you lot here?
It's like the old line about retirement. I married you for better, for worse, but not for lunch. Yeah, I've seen that too. I've had those conversations with people, and it is interesting how all those things require some kind of negotiation between the parties, and and including their children, and the children don't understand because they're just those are my parents, that sort of thing. So how do you help them? I mean, I guess you have um I guess you're teaching them some kind of negotiation skills in this process, aren't you?
Mostly with themselves, to be honest. There is so many things that, so not only do we as humans like to do things the hard way because we don't count the things that are super easy. Oh, well, that's not, no, I can't charge for that. No, that's a special skill you have. You absolutely can charge. What I really want my clients to get from working together is an easier life. So that everything flows better.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I hope that will happen, the way I lead people towards that, is through stacking of all of the tasks within their business. Meaning that if they do one thing, if they're on a podcast, it moves a lot of the areas that they want to work on together. It's not just one step. I have to do a podcast and then I have to write it up and then I have to do social media. It's all the same thing. By meeting someone new, we're expanding our network. Maybe people listening, there's a visibility thing. Maybe we are talking about concepts that will clarify things in a brand or a piece of copy, so that by doing one thing, you move 7 or 8 things forwards. So we simplify. And then I try and prise their fingers off all the things that don't quite work or they've been doing for a long time that don't really enjoy. So by the end, hopefully, they're sleeping more. They are more efficient, because I don't really talk about it as efficiency because that sounds very boring. But if you're doing less and getting more, you're going to have more time. You're going to be a nicer human being because, frankly, you're sleeping better. And so in tiny ways, I like to think of myself as, helping other people's children and saving other people's marriages. And because all of those things, when people aren't earning enough and they're working too many hours, they're vile. We all are when we're that stressed.
That's really true. I really love this because I see that too. When I started the podcast a year ago, the thing was, well, where are all these people going to come from, for one? And so I just asked people to introduce me to people. So that happened. But what I also found was that I'd meet people and they'd say, well, let's get together and have a talk. I said, I'd love to do that. Why don't we do that as a podcast episode? And therefore I'm meeting this person. We're having our first conversation, and we're going to share this with the world. And that made it easy for me. I'm just appreciating this whole idea of something being easy, and people say, how do you do all this? How do you do all this? Well, it's easy. I don't feel like it's work. I enjoy it. And I'm grateful for the hour I have with you. I'm grateful for that because I know that your time is precious and mine is too. And so if we get to spend an hour together, then we get to share that with the world. It's a beautiful thing.
It really is.
So I have 2 more questions for you. One has to do with your sign on your wall and why you bill yourself as the evil coach. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. So I have 2 businesses. I have Rethink Central, which is all about joining a mastermind and growing a business, or running a mastermind, because most of my business is about that. It's about relationships, about small groups that achieve more together. That's the business I've had for a long time. Evil Coach is much newer. And I started it during the pandemic. I needed a bit of light relief, really. So bear with me. This is going to go in a direction you were probably not expecting. So brace yourselves.
Love this. I love it.
So basically, it is a strategy training course. That's what Evil Coach is, which is very boring. Most strategy is unbelievably badly taught. If you pick up a strategy book, you'll be asleep very quickly. And it sounds fancy and difficult and hard, none of which is true. A good strategy will make your life easier. So what I discovered when I began to look around the industry, like I said, I've done this for over a decade, was that new coaches and new people to the industry, they feel that strategy is something for other people. Like they don't need it themselves. And the way they behave is very, very similar to another community that I'm very much part of, which is the BDSM kink community, which has like a very complicated system and most people don't understand it. And what they think they know isn't actually how it fits together. And people get overexcited and do stuff that frankly makes no sense at all, which is very similar to the way brand new entrepreneurs will watch all of the webinars and try and be on all the social stuff and do all of the things. So Evil Coach, ridiculous as it sounds, uses the lens of kink, of like strange kink communities to view strategy. It's not salacious, but it is filled full of giggling and innuendo and just ridiculousness. Because when people are giggling, they learn really easily. It's delightful and foolish.
You're
Wonderful.
taking them out of their normal mode of living and putting them into an alternative mindset or alternative world view that allows them to see things that they wouldn't be able to see otherwise.
Exactly. And to be clear, I am not showing them rude pictures. I am simply fit, like we are humans are curious. You're obviously a very curious person with all these people you've spoken to. And entrepreneurs, I think, are the most curious people on the planet. And so, of course, they're curious about how does kink work? How can I possibly be anything like that? Well, step this way, sir. And it is so lovely. Inside the program, we just giggle all the time about ridiculous stuff, and people produce amazing, clear strategy as a result of it. Whereas if I sat them down and said, everybody turn to page 8 and forced them to work through a standard, production manager strategy, it's so boring. Whereas this way, people giggle, they do the homework, everything's great. Their lives are immeasurably better. And just as a bonus, because I believe in stacking, my community is better understood as a result of it, because the way it's portrayed, that's not what we do. No, stop it. So yes, Evil Coach is ridiculous and fabulous. And our tagline is whip your business into shape.
Are those ravens that are?
They are, yes. I have a whole set behind me of skulls and ravens, and like I said, ridiculous.
They're my favorite birds.
There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, I used to watch them from my I used to live in Jacksonville, Wyoming, and from my upstairs condo window, I could watch them as they hung on the fence. It was just right out of Hitchcock's The Birds, as they were watching, and they were huge. They were huge birds, and I just really loved them. And so ravens and crows, they're my favorite.
Absolutely, and they're super smart and super curious as well. So I can see why you like them so much.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that's we can talk about that more at another time. Okay, the last question is that you told me before we came on the air that you read 1,000 books last year. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. It was, I think it's slightly over 1,000 books. I sort of lost count in the middle, but yes.
So, one, how did you do it, and what is the range of subject matter that comes with 1,000 books in a year?
Well, I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I listen very quickly. I listen at 2.5 speed, and I don't watch TV particularly. So if I am not speaking to someone and I'm not working, every other point in my day, I am listening to a book very, very quickly. And I started doing it because about 5 years ago, I went blind briefly, not completely blind, but partially blind. And I had a problem with my inner ear. And if I moved my head at all, I threw up and then fell over, which was debilitating to say the least. And it was like being, that, when you're a student, you get wildly drunk and the room would spin. It felt like that for about 2.5 years.
I have an
It
inner
was-
ear issue too,
just, you have my sympathy. It's just horrendous.
like this. Yeah, it's like this.
Yes,
Yeah.
just awful. So fortunately, I got my sight back in March 2020, which you'll remember something else big happened in March 2020. So I was like, that's it, I can see, I'm going to do all the things. And no, like everyone else, I had to stay home. And in my case, I stayed home and listened to audiobooks. And what I've noticed is I have been speeding up as time goes. So I read in 2022, I read about 600 books. But yes, it was 1,000 books last year. And I think surely I'm going to top out at some point. And as for topics, well, I read, obviously for work, I read a lot of business and marketing and psychology and neuroscience. I read a lot of that kind of stuff. But I also read a lot of fiction. I read a lot of Victorian. I've been reading a lot of Dickens recently. I'm working my way up to having a crack at Tolstoy again, but if it's only going to take you 2 days to read War and Peace, it's doable. Back in the day when it was like, well, that's a 3-month commitment. No, not anymore. But yes, I like a lot of historical crime fiction. It's good. What about you? What do you read?
I read history, I read philosophy, I read, I'm particularly interested in architecture, and particularly
nice.
the phenomenology of architecture. For example, I've been working through, Palasma is a Finnish architect, and so he's writing about the effect of the senses in architecture. It's fascinating. I read theology. I'm a Presbyterian minister. I read, but I'm not really interested in church stuff because I've already, that's been so prevalent throughout my whole life. But I'm interested in, theology and the philosophy behind it, the historical background. What else do I read? I'm really interested in World War One, and I'm interested in science, and in particular the history of science, history and philosophy of science. I have a deep passion for the Lewis and Clark expedition story. For Americans, that's one of those key stories that is probably not well known at all. I've got a book in draft form, in an outline form that I'll one day write. So what else is there? I like graphic novels. I like anime, manga. I like and you expand that out. I like movies, and I like all kinds of movies. So I'm a culture junkie, and so the way I approach books is when I hear something I don't know anything about. Oh, that's interesting. Someone is some. I will go seek some books on that, and I'll have 2 or 3 books on that topic that I can come back to when I meet someone who's knowledgeable in that field. Then I can brief myself so I can have an intelligent conversation with them.
Yes, I agree with you there. I finished this morning a history of Middle Europe, so Hungary, Austria, from the 14th century to up to date, to past communism. It's fascinating. It's a long book, but it is just so interesting how all of those different empires, how the Habsburg Empire rose and fell, and how communism rose and fell. Just fascinating. And it being such a big spread, so over 700 years, it just covered, you could see that sort of sweep of history, the way petty little gripes from 200 years ago were coming back and biting people in the government. Fascinating.
Who's the author of that?
I would have to consult. I'll send you a link.
Okay, because I may have that book. I may, because that area. I'm interested. Well, I'm interested in all of Europe. Um, I've got German and Scottish ancestry in my veins, so I like both of those areas. I like, I like Eastern Europe. I like how different it is from Western Europe. I like, um, yeah, all these things. I'm interested in 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 the transitions in history and how we got from one place to the next, and the hidden things that nobody wants to talk about. And
Exactly. And I've lived in Hungary quite a few times before the pandemic. In fact, I was coming from Hungary. Well, I think no, I used to be nomadic, so I was in living in Hungary for a long time. Then for me, 9 months. That's a very long time. And then I moved to Malta, totally different, Mediterranean.
yeah,
And so it was lovely to read more. And I do have the author of that book. So it's The Middle Kingdoms by Martin Raddy, who has written a very excellent book on the history of the Habsburgs as well. Strongly recommend both.
I will look into it. Well, this has really been fantastic. Totally not what I thought we would be talking about because I didn't really know what we would be talking about. Um, I have one more question for you. Since we've kind of gone through all this, well, we're still going through a lot of transition in the world. Um, what is it that you connect to that gives you hope for the future? If you have hope for the future.
Oh yes, I always have hope.
Okay,
I,
well,
I but
I
I
use
also think we are
go down.
we're sort of stuck with the personality we got. I have an optimistic personality. I have friends who are not so optimistic. Even in the most optimistic of moments, they'll be looking for the little bit of grey sky on everything. So
Yeah.
I'm an optimistic person. You know, like we sort out most things eventually. It's a lot of work, but it gets done. So I'm optimistic. At the moment, it's a very simple thing. There is a massive tree directly outside my window, and it is budding. Now, it is January in London. It has no right to be growing flowers right now. It's going to regret that because it's got fooled by the fact it was very cold and now it's a little bit warmer. But I know, and this gives me, every time I look at it and think, you fool, look at you growing flowers, you're going to regret that. I know it'll grow them, they'll fall off, they'll grow back. They'll be fine. If I look at it in, I don't know, whatever, May, it's going to be covered in leaves and super happy. That gives me a lot of positiveness.
I like that. It's in a sense, it's saying whatever you see right now it is going to change, and it's not necessarily going to be what you think it will be, but it could well be beautiful, and it's coming. So
Absolutely. And also you can mess up and it's okay. It'll be all right.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's part of the burnout thing. I think we burn out because we don't want to mess up, we don't want to make mistakes, we don't want to be embarrassed, all of those sort of things. And once you kind of resolve yourself to say, oh, okay, I'll just screw it up and we'll fix it and we'll move on, then it relieves things. So
Absolutely. May I ask you a question?
sure, of course.
What are you optimistic about? What's giving you that little spark of hope?
Uh, there's a lot of things that give me hope for the future. And 2 years ago, I wouldn't have said this, but I see that people, um, I'm seeing people who, for the first time, are beginning to think for themselves. They want things, and they're beginning to make distinctions in their life that before they did not. And one of the ways I describe that is that people, particularly if they work in a corporate environment, tend to over time begin to take on the values of the corporation. You know, the two become one, and then when that corporation or that institution begins to fail or begins to no longer be dependable, it causes a crisis in that individual, and they begin to question, who am I and what am I supposed to be doing? Can I stay here? You know, is this a dependable place to work for the rest of my career? All those sort of things. This is the stuff I see. And what I'm finding is that people are beginning to have conversations with other people about this. They're talking with one another about the deeper things in life. And I didn't expect to see that during the height of, coming out of COVID, where everybody was in a panic mode, everybody was afraid, and all of a sudden they have been liberated in a sense. There's a kind of a liberation taking place where people are willing to have this conversation. I think that was one of the impetuses to actually do the podcast, was that people were willing to be in conversation with other people and at a deeper level, and maybe even with people they don't even really know. And so that sense of I'm going to make it through this, and I'm going to be different in the future than I am today, is to me a very hopeful thing. Because I think what we'll see in the future is a whole lot more emphasis on being in community rather than being in work. And that work is important, but it's not going to be as important as it is in how do we interact with each other as neighbors and family members and citizens and friends and colleagues and collaborators and all of those sort of things.
I love that. I think you're right. Community is everything. We are nothing without each other.
And it's going to be, and the interesting, and so the interesting thing is to see these large historical trends, and the large historical trend of this, this global elite seeking to impose its will upon the rest of the planet is really, I find it very humorous, because they think that they've got it all together and they figured it out. And what I'm looking at is that you made the biggest mistake that all business people make, which is bad timing. Your timing was 20 years ago. Today, it's not. It's going to be very difficult because, we all have our little phones that we work with, and we're talking to people, and you probably talk to people all over the world every day. I do the same as well. And the fact that we can have this conversation with someone in Hungary or someone in Kenya or someone in Chile or Australia says that we are no longer bounded by the physical place that we live, and yet we can be committed to that physical place for strengthening its benefit and strengthening the benefit of the people who maybe haven't figured this out yet. So we can be people who invite people in to have conversation and be a part of a life that we weren't able to have 15 years ago or 20 years ago.
Absolutely. When I was pre-pandemic, when I spent 10 years with no home base, just moving all the time because I wanted to see different countries, I always used to say that I had my entire village in my phone, in my pocket, and I could live anywhere because my village went with me. It's a beautiful thing.
You remind me of a woman that I got to know for a little bit when she was in Jackson Hole, and she has a corporate job, and she can do her corporate job wherever she goes. And she is all over the world, and I'm amazed at where she goes, and I'm envious of that, but I couldn't do that. I need more rootedness. I mean, my family's laughing because I've moved so many times, but I need more rootedness than what my perception is that she has. But that's that kind of nomadic thing is there's a theme there. And, if you look at YouTube, you see all these people who are living in their vans, they're having van life, and I'm thinking, I wish I was 20 years old and I could go do that. But I'm 70 and I can't do that now.
Say there's nothing to stop you doing it for a bit, though. You do it for 3 months.
Well, I do that. I know I spent 3 months in Wyoming this past fall, and I've done that. I have done that. So it's not like I haven't never done that. It's not just wishfulness. It's actually I've gone to places, and and typically I'll go by myself because that's the way you're going to meet people, because you're talking with your friend or your spouse or your a child, your son or daughter, and you're not focused on all the people who are from there, and yeah, that's why I like to do that. So
yes, I agree with you there. I had I had a strange little personal crisis during the middle of the pandemic when I suddenly realized that because I was living in one place, my possessions weighed more than the baggage allowance. They weighed more, in my case, than 23 kilos, which is one suitcase. And suddenly I was like, after a decade, I own things. It was a very strange experience.
that's interesting. Did you have a home base during that time?
No, not at all.
So everything you own went with you everywhere you went.
Exactly. Laptop, audio equipment, a very small quantity of clothes. But fortunately, like back in the day, being a reader, you had to carry books with you. Now it's all digital, it's all audio, it's all in the cloud. So it's delightful.
I like the hard copies, as you can tell.
Well,
So
me too. But on the other hand, if I have to carry them everywhere like a snail, no, thank you. I'm happy with Audible.
you're right. You're exactly right there. Well, it is interesting, and um, I think the opportunity to travel is a gift that has been given to our generations, the current generations. And I mean, I remember my my mother's father was born in 1886, and my father's father was born in 1894. And when my oldest son was born, he's named after me in 1985. There are four generations of at Brennigers, and the four of us were together, and my son was 2 months old or something like that. And I asked my father's father, who we call Pappy, he says, what's the most significant change you've seen during the course of your life? So here he is, um, just turning, he had just turned 90 at this point, and he said, the radio. And I said, why the radio? He says, it's because when the radio came out when he was a child, he said, we found out there were people that lived elsewhere. And I thought that was such an insightful sort of thing. And then I realized that where I grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and there are three cities all in a kind of a triangle. It's called a triad. And they're probably 20, 25 miles apart. But it wasn't until I was out of high school that I ever went to those other two towns. We never moved, except we'd never go anywhere other than to where family was. And so that's 50 years ago. And now people like you were nomadic for a decade, and you could go anywhere you wanted, and you would find people who would receive you and welcome you into their community, into their country, and you would be there for a while, and then you'd move on. And there's a
Yes.
there's an essay that you probably would enjoy by Georg Simmel called "The Stranger," and it's about the person who comes and stays for a while and then moves on. And it's not that they're a tourist; it's just that they come and they offer what they have to offer, and then time comes for them to leave, and they go. And I identify with that. And so this move that I'm about to make next week, I'm perceiving this as very different than all the others that I've made. And this will probably be the last place I live for the remainder of my life. Because it has that feeling of difference but that means it becomes home base or branching out and going places. And we'll see how all that unfolds. So if you get to the States, you're welcome to come to the Eddie House, as I'm going to call it, and we'll have we'll have tea, or we'll do something. But you'd be welcome to have in my home as
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. And I'm often in the States, or I was before the pandemic. I was always there. Now, I don't know, it feels like a very long wait. Traveling feels a lot more tiring since the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, I used to, I've got 1 million miles on Delta stored up, and I haven't flown in since August of 2020. So
Wow.
yeah, that's really unusual for me not to get on a plane, but I have no interest. I'd rather drive where I need to go. So we'll see. We'll see. Liz, this has been fantastic. I'm glad to know you. I'm trying to remember who introduced us. I forget who
Well,
did.
now you're putting me on the spot.
No,
My
and
mind has gone blank.
well, there are lots of people, probably somebody over there in England that knows you, and
I actually genuinely don't know. I'm not sure.
I'll figure it out and I'll let you know, because
Thank
I
you.
need to thank them, for
Me
and
too.
I
This
wish
has
you
been
well.
lovely.
I wish you well in all your work, It sounds like you're doing great work, and it's needed, and every success to you.
Well, thank you. Right back at you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for watching. Please sign up, give us a like button. And if you leave a comment, we'll pass it along because we love to hear from you. And thank you. And we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye-bye.